This is a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.
I'm Tony Bruschi. Thanks for joining us. We go now to the courtroom for segment number 1 of today's coverage in the trial of Scot Peterson, the Parkland School resource police officer charged with negligence in failing to protect the children of Parkland as a gunman went through the school executing many students. Let's go to the courtroom.
Scot Peterson, 197166 CF10A. I have Ms. Gomes, Mr. Killer, and Mr. Klinger present for the state. I have Mr. Igarsh present with Mr. Peterson, who likewise is present. We are outside the presence of the jury. State, is there anything that you need me to address before we resume your presentation?
No, Your Honor.
Defense, anything you need me to address?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
Judge, throughout the trial, there have been a number of objections to things that I've done in opening and on cross as it relates to bringing out testimony that Scott Israel, former sheriff, conducted a press conference where he announced to the world that my client should have gone in to kill the killer, and he left out a colossal amount of material that would have given the public a different view of it. And we believe that at a minimum affected the public's view of the case, and that included the officers who have been testifying and who continue to testify, because they erroneously believed, hearing it from the top, that my client then must have known where the shooter or shooters were located, believed that people were being killed, and he did nothing except cowered it. It affected their testimony, we believe so far. We believe that it will continue to do so. That's one reason why we want to get that testimony out. The second reason is that we also believe that it set in motion a political firestorm that included people demanding that my client be charged criminally for acts that were nothing more than innocuous and where my client was being of service. And finally, it led to not an internal investigation by the Broward Sheriff's Office or even an independent investigation by FDLE. The facts are, and this is what Keith Reddick's testimony will be, that the governor then insisted, after this press conference, insisted that my client be investigated. They called it looking into the actions of the officers, but we will be able to show that it was specifically geared towards my client, who was the only one who was charged. All of that is extremely relevant. The state doesn't have to miss it.
How is any of what you just said relevant?
Well, first, we believe because that testimony was out there publicly and these witnesses heard that testimony.
What witness?
Well, the court did not allow us to get into that. I will recall a couple of them to make sure that they say for the record that they heard Sheriff Israel's testimony when he did that. And the argument then to be made to the jury is that then created in their minds, again, they weren't there when the shots were fired, so they relied upon Sheriff Israel to erroneously conclude that my client must have known where the shots were coming from. Because in that press conference, he never said that my client ordered the code red, that my client did all the things that we're going to get out, and or that there were numerous people who had confusion over where the shots were coming from. He had an agenda, Judge. He did.
Right, but you're talking about the, number one, the political process is a separate branch of government. It has nothing to do with here, zero. Number two, there is no relevance to the state attorney's office making a charging decision. The elected state attorney filed the charges. This jury is not going to be asked anything regarding was that a correct or incorrect decision to file the charges. The only thing this jury is going to be asked is, has the state proven the elements of each crime beyond a reasonable doubt, yes or no?
I understand that, but I led off with the most significant argument that I believe that the law permits me to make.
No, I don't agree with you at all, sir. Whatever you said in your opening statement, that was at your own election and at your own peril. But you can call Scott Israel to testify about training, I guess, but he can't talk to this jury about what internal decisions were made regarding investigations. No, it's not relevant.
Judge, let me make sure that I'm making myself clear. First, is the court precluding me from first saying that Scott Israel conducted that press conference and first put out all of this information for the public?
Scott Israel wasn't at Parkland, correct? He wasn't there that day.
He was not.
Okay, so what relevance does that have to anything that this jury has to decide?
Because if the witnesses in this case, first and foremost, heard Scott Israel's conclusions as they did, and as the public did, and as the families in this case did. But let's talk about the witnesses specifically. If they heard...
What witness?
Well, we intend to ask that question. I wanted to ask the other witnesses, if I need to recall them as defense witnesses, assuming their testimony is, yes, we heard...
Who has said that your client heard shots in the building and didn't respond appropriately? What witnesses testified to that? None of them have.
You're right.
They've all testified to this is what their training was. And quite candidly, their opinion about the way your client behaved or didn't behave is, again, irrelevant. The jury gets to decide that.
I understand that.
So that's why I've been sustaining the objections. None of this is relevant. Relevancy is anything that will allow the fact finder to make a decision on any issue that they have to decide. Nothing that you've talked to me about so far today is anything that the jury has to decide.
If witnesses hear the press conference that Scott Israel gives, and they then utilize that for their belief as to
You
what...
keep saying that, but what witness? I think you're talking about witness credibility or bias. I'm not sure, but so what witness has been biased? What witness's credibility is at issue because they heard a press conference? Specifically, give me a name, sir.
I have yet to be able to ask that question of either... I mean, there have been three witnesses that I'd like to ask that question, and I would recall Schroy, Heinrich, and Burton, and ask them if they heard that press conference prior to ever giving their depositions in this case, which would be the facts. And that does influence their testimony because they're coming in here and concluding that my client must have heard the shots.
They didn't. No one said that, and you didn't ask them that, sir.
Judge, they're not saying it, but our argument is, by implication, that's why they feel so strongly against my client. They're willing to say that you got to move towards the sound. And when I say, well, you don't know where the sounds are coming from, you know, what do you do?
Mr. Irish, that's something you can make in a closing argument. No witness has been asked or answered any question regarding their evaluation of your client's training or their evaluation of your client's behavior. They have been asked and they have answered questions and they have testified about their own training and their own behavior.
I'm talking about facts, Judge. Sheriff Israel will testify that all he said was he should have gone in to kill the killer.
He's not going to testify in front of this jury about that because I'm not going to let him.
But if we can prove and thus make the argument that as a result of that, witnesses heard those statements and that they factored that into the analysis of my client prior to testifying.
Witnesses aren't, Mr. Irish, these witnesses aren't giving their analysis about anything. Detective Polo testified to what he did, and then we watched his body camera, and it showed what he did. On that day, February 14, 2018, what media event he viewed or didn't view afterwards couldn't be less relevant to his testimony.
By implication, all three, Heinrich, Schroy, Polo, and Burton, all, we believe, gave testimony suggesting erroneously that my client should have continued to move closer to the sound, believing that, they all believed that that could have been possible. And they only believed that because Sheriff Israel gave that press conference.
Which is exactly the reason why we don't let witnesses give their opinions about anything. Fact witnesses testify about facts. Expert witnesses can testify about an opinion. If the jury believes them to be an expert, they can listen to their opinion or disregard their opinion. But fact witnesses testify about facts, period.
They're facts.
I mean, I'll let you proffer whatever you want outside the presence of the jury. I'll send the jury out. You ask the witnesses whatever questions you want on appellate review if this doesn't go your way. And if it turns out that I'm mistaken in that decision, then I guess the District Court of Appeal will let me know that. But no one can talk about a media event or why a charging decision was made or any political motivation for anything, period.
So just so we're clear, we can move on. The court over my objection is precluding me from calling Scott Israel to testify that this is what he said during the press conference, that my client should have gone in and killed the killer.
I'm not going to give you a advisory opinion as to anything. you can call whatever witness you want. If it's something that we need to proffer outside of the jury, then I'll send the jury out and you can ask the questions however you see fit.
I just wanted to avoid bringing him in if the court's not going to even let me get into these areas. Right?
I will let you put it on the record, sir, but not in front of the jury. Look, I'm looking at the preliminary jury instructions. This is 16.5, neglect of a child with great bodily harm, permanent disability, or permanent disfigurement. Number 1, the defendant willfully or by culpable negligence failed or omitted to provide said victim with care, supervision, and services, or the defendant failed to make a reasonable effort to protect the victim from abuse, neglect, or exploitation by another. 2, in doing so, the defendant caused great bodily harm, permanent disability, or permanent disfigurement to the victim. 3, the defendant was a caregiver for the victim. 4, the defendant was under the victim, was under the age of 18 years of age. That's it. That's the only thing the jury's being asked to decide. So tell me how Scott Israel's opinion about anything is relevant to any of the elements of the crime charge.
Because when he gave that press conference, Judge, it was literally a week after this had occurred. The facts were not out yet, and when he came...
Sir, the facts are being put out in this trial. Whatever happened before June 5th, 2023 is not relevant to this jury. And they didn't hear anything about it.
But
and they said they were putting all that aside.
If it impacted, I'm not talking about the jurors. I'm talking about if witnesses who are testifying in this trial, if they were to testify, that they did see that press conference, and then as a result of that, believed that my client must have known where the sounds were coming from.
Sir, you're repeating yourself. I understand. You're making a closing argument.
But
have you even asked the state witness yet? Do you think Deputy Peterson responded correctly, yes or no? You haven't asked anyone that. Correct?
Not these witnesses who,
right,
again, heard information that I think...
How do you know that? Sir, that's your entire argument, which I find no merit in, is exactly the reason why we don't try these things in the media. We try these things in court.
Are you allowing me then to ask witnesses if they heard Sheriff Israel's press conference?
Not in front of the jury. Tell me, when we get done with each witness, if you want me to send the jury out and you want to proffer their testimony, if I hear what the questions and answers are and I think that it's relevant and it's admissible, then we'll bring the jury back in and then you can ask your questions.
Will the court permit me to call Sheriff Israel to say that he never contacted my client to find out what he knew?
Tell me why that's relevant. Why is that relevant to this jury?
To determine what Sheriff Israel, the leader of...
Well, who cares what Sheriff Israel determined? He didn't file the charges. Do you think the state attorney's office ever files charges that the law enforcement doesn't agree with, or vice versa? Do you think there's times when law enforcement wants charges to be filed and the state attorney's office chooses not to do so? You're talking about different branches of government, sir.
There's a difference.
This is very basic.
There's a difference between what the court may believe, either in this case or in other cases.
I don't believe anything, sir. I'm the referee. All I do is apply the rules.
And or what I'm capable of arguing to this jury, which to my core, it's not just a symbolic defense argument, is what I believe. And if I can't ask about Sheriff Israel and the fact that he had a plan to throw my client under the bus, okay? In this instance, I could say that he didn't speak with my client even though he had his personal cell phone, that he then held a press conference after initially defending my client and other officers, and that he announced to the world that my client didn't go in to kill the killer, erroneously suggesting that he knew where the killer was exactly when the shooter was there. And then when a parent asked him about it, instead of correcting the record, he then said, yeah, you're right, he's a coward, we don't know why he didn't go in. Making that parent believe erroneously that he was responsible for her daughter's death when my client wasn't even there when her daughter was killed on the first floor. And then from that press conference, which again led to the Oval Office, it got out there, people saw it, the witnesses, if you'll allow me, I'll recall them, they'll say that they saw it.
How do you know that they saw it?
I believe that they did, Judge. I think it was out there. And if not, they say no, then okay, I lose on that issue.
Why didn't you ask me to proffer that outside the presence of the jury up to this point?
Judge, I thought every time I brought up that subject matter while I was up there...
Because it's not relevant, sir. Scott Israel didn't make the charging decision in this case, correct? You do understand that?
I understand
that. Okay, so again, who the elected state attorney decides to charge with a crime, and whatever crime the elected state attorney decides to charge, is the purview of the elected state attorney. That's the executive branch of government. This is the judicial branch of government. Your client's pled not guilty. We're going to introduce facts in this case, and the jury gets to decide.
If Sheriff Riddick's testimony, I proffer to you because I took his deposition, is we only conducted a criminal investigation because the governor
No, I'm not going to let you say that.
ordered us to, and that came after this famous press conference, which got picked up everywhere.
Mr. Agash, you're not listening to me. Now we're behind schedule. So why does any of that matter?
Judge,
What question does the jury have to be asked? I'll ask you again. What issue does the jury have to decide that has anything to do with anything that you've just talked to me about for the last 17 minutes?
whether there's bias, motive, interest on the witnesses, in the witnesses' perspective, and if they saw that press conference and it impacted them, then it's
You
relevant.
didn't ask them.
I plan on, because quite frankly, you shut me down, Judge. I was going to get into that area.
No, sir. All you have to do is tell me what you want to do. I'll send the jury out. We can do a proffer outside of the presence of the jury if you
Okay.
think that I'm ruling incorrectly, and we can go from there. But what one investigator or 100 investigators decided to do or didn't do, and what their motivations for doing that were or were not, is totally irrelevant to what this jury has to decide. Your client is charged with these crimes. This is his trial. And the jury will decide if the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt whether he's guilty or not of each element of each crime. But they're never going to hear me read, why did Scott Israel do what he did? Why did Investigator Riddick do what he did? Why was the defendant charged with the crimes that he was charged with? That is not the purview of the jury. Therefore, none of it is relevant evidence.
Okay. If I'm saying he's not guilty, I believe that I have the right to say these charges were politically motivated.
Well, you are incorrect, sir, but you're entitled to your own belief. But in this courtroom, my decision on what's relevant or not is what
I'm going to certainly respect it and respectfully disagree with what I'm
All right,
allowed
well,
to.
Mr. Igars, here's what we'll do then. You come back tomorrow or after the lunch break or any day, and please bring me any Florida case, any Florida statute, any rule of criminal procedure that says the motivation for criminal charges is relevant. I invite you to find one Florida case in the history of the criminal courts of Florida where the decision to make a charge or not make a charge is relevant, admissible testimony. Anything else, sir? We're done with this subject.
Yes, but on that first issue that I brought out, what a witness saw and where they got their information from prior to testifying would be relevant.
No, what a witness saw and where they got their information from about what they're testifying about.
Yes.
About February 14th, 2018. That is relevant.
So I would like to be able to ask witnesses, did they see Sheriff Israel's press conference? And if that influenced them in any way in formulating the facts about which they're testifying.
You just said, did someone's press conference influence their version of the facts?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think you just made my argument for me, sir. Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, very good. Please bring the jury in. State, you have your next witness ready to go?
We do, Your Honor, yes.
Okay.
Jurors entering.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Once you're back in those seats, you all may be seated. All the parties may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you using your notepads, I'll give you a moment to get the notepads back out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you had a nice night. When we pressed pause on the trial yesterday, we were in the middle of the state's presentation. We're going to resume at that point. State, when you are ready, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state will call Detective Danny Christian. And I'll be asking to admit an exhibit, and I'd ask for the TVs to be down.
The TVs have to be off.
Yes, Your Honor.
Court Deputy Unit, we're going to need the TVs off, please. Sir, if I can have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please.
Good morning.
Once you reach it, before you have a seat, if you can just stop and look at me, raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated. And sir, once you're seated, if I could just scoot that chair all the way up as far as it will go. Can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
My name is Detective Danny Christian. The last name is spelled Krystyan.
D-A-N-N-Y?
Correct.
Mr. Kilmer, you may inquire.
Thank you. Detective Christian, where do you currently work?
I currently work for the Broward County Sheriff's Office. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for approximately 22 years, and I have a total of approximately 27 years of law enforcement experience. I'm currently assigned as a crime scene detective, and I've been with that unit for approximately 9 years. Prior to that, I was a road patrol deputy, and prior to that, I was an officer at Waverly PD in Waverly, Ohio.
Now, back on February 14th of 2018, were you assigned to the crime scene unit at that date, at that point in time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, in regards to what occurred at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, were you tasked with doing anything specific
Yes.
with the building?
I was assigned as the lead forensic detective for the first floor of Building 12 in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas campus.
Did all of the work that you conducted take place in regards to the first floor?
Yes.
Now, as a crime scene detective, what were you tasked with in February 2018 for the 1200 building at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?
So as a forensic crime scene detective, our job basically is we have three primary goals. Number one is to document the crime scene. So we do that in numerous ways. What we'll do is we'll take photographs, generally first thing that we do. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to take some 360 photography, which is kind of like when you're buying real estate and you kind of put you in the middle of the room and you can kind of look around on your computer screen to see everything in perspective. The other things we're going to do is if it's applicable, we're going to take aerial photography. We'll do that with either a drone or a helicopter. So those are different ways that we'll document the scene. And we'll also take measurements of the scene if we need to as far as documentation. And we're going to notate where all the evidence is. So that's something that we can recreate a crime scene later on if we need to.
In terms of the actual physical evidence, what do you do with, let's say, for instance, shell casing?
So normally we would document it photography-wise. Then at some point we would collect it. And then after we collect it, if it needed be, we'd process it. And then we'd have it ready to present to trial.
What do you mean by process it?
So in some cases, we may be looking for fingerprints or DNA. So if that's the case, we would that's what we consider processing if we're looking for a particular type of substance on the evidence. And in many cases, it'll be either DNA or fingerprints.
In this particular case, when you were tasked on the first floor, did you take photographs of the first floor?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective Christian, I'm showing you it's been previously marked as 2C or CC for state's identification. Can you please take a look at that? Detective Christian, do you recognize these nine pictures?
I do.
Are these a true and accurate representation of the photographs taken at 1200 building of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas campus on February of 2018?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in states 2C, which is a composite of 9 photographs, in as states 29.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2C for identification will now be in evidence as States Exhibit 29, a composite exhibit of 9 photos.
Your Honor, permission to publish?
You may.
And the cameras, the TVs in the back are off, correct?
Court Deputy, everything's off, correct?
Detective Christian, I'm not showing you what's now in evidence is states 29. Do you recognize this photograph?
I do.
And what is it of?
This is building number 12, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. This viewpoint is basically east looking west, and that is the east side of the building 12.
Now showing you the second picture. Is this a closer up of that, what we were just looking at?
Correct.
Now, are you familiar with, is the annotator working, Your Honor? It is, correct. Can you mark the main hallway, the doors to the main hallway? You can actually circle it on your screen there. So that's to the main hallway to where the classrooms are.
Correct.
And the door to the right, tan in color, what does that mean?
That's access to the stairwell.
Now showing you the third picture there. Is that additionally, or what is this?
That's also the doors that access the hallway into the classrooms.
Now, from this photograph, it appears as if there's a glare in the 2 window slats. Did you actually see these window slats in person?
Yes.
Could you see through them?
They were slightly tinted, so not real good.
Now I'm looking at the fourth picture. What is this of?
The same image, just looking from west to east and looking out toward the east. The same doors.
In the photograph, can you see the cars outside?
Yes.
Now I'm showing you the next image and focusing on, do you see the room number associated with this photograph? It might be a little blurry.
Yeah, I don't think the room number came out. I can refer to my map.
I can show it to you in person if it helps. Your Honor, may I approach a witness?
You may.
I believe it's,
Detective Christian, can you see it on the actual photo itself?
yeah, 1216 is what I thought.
1216, is that on the east side of the building or on the west side?
It's more closer to the east side, yes.
In this photograph, do you see shell casings?
I do.
Where are they located? Can you just circle or highlight the location of?
Yeah, so there's quite a few. There's.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll go back to the pencil. I apologize.
There we go. There's some here, some here, some here. Some there, some there. And I think there's a few over here too, in here.
In total, how many shell casings did you recover from the first floor?
So I collected a total of 70 fired casings from the first floor.
Given that you collected 70, how do you keep track of where you find them? How does that work?
So when you're dealing with a large crime scene like we did, the hallway is almost right around 200 feet. So what we had to do was break that hallway down into compartments to help us process that scene and make it a little more manageable. And in case we have to reconstruct the crime scene, we need to put all the evidence back to exactly where we found it. So that helps us with measurements and different ways of putting the evidence back. So what we did is we knocked it down into quadrants. So we did 20-foot quadrants in the hallway, and we marked them 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, all the way up to 110, going from west to east. Okay, so that helped us narrow down a quadrant where the evidence was collected. That way, when I testify, if I say quadrant 1-6, we know that's in that particular area of the hallway, as opposed to the front or the back. So it just helps us narrow down where the evidence is located.
In regards to room 12 or outside room 1216, what quadrant was this? Do you recall?
That would have been probably quadrant 1-8.
1-8. Okay. So 10 is on the east side.
Yeah, 10 is
on the east
10
side.
is east, and then the quadrant 1-1 is on the west side.
Okay. Showing you now the next picture.
And just to let you know, we also did the same thing on the second floor and the third floor. So if you do hear any testimony about those floors, the quadrants are exactly the same way. Instead of 1-1, it would be 2 for the second floor, and begin with a 3 on the third floor.
Okay, now showing you the next picture. Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is a viewpoint from west looking east.
Do you see any shell casings in this particular photo?
Yeah, there's a couple in here.
Can you circle them as well for the jurors,
One
please?
there, one there. I think there was one in the back there too, somewhere. That might be one there too.
Now, in terms of the quadrants, this is something you document, make a report, things of that nature, so
Yes.
you know where the shell casing is?
Yes. And we'll also mark on the floors exactly where each shell casing came from. That way, if we have to reenact the crime scene, we could actually put all the evidence right back exactly where we found it.
So does that mean that after you pick up, for instance, the shell casing on the far right side, kind of near the corner, that shell casing, after you pick it up, you would mark the floor?
Yes, we mark the floor. That way, if we need to put it back, we can put it back exactly where we found it.
Let me. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, this is the west side double doors of building 12. This is a viewpoint from east looking west.
So this would be quadrant
110.
110.
Correct.
You see the pink rods kind of sticking out?
Yes.
What are those?
Those are ballistic trajectory rods, and we use those as a tool. So whenever there's a projectile sight, and what would be easier for you maybe to understand would be a bullet hole. If we find a bullet hole that a bullet penetrated through, we'll put that rod in there, and that rod kind of gives us a general idea of the direction that bullet came from. So the rod kind of points in the direction where the bullet came from.
Now showing it in correspondence, that photo with the next one, what are we looking at here?
So those are the same west side double doors that lead into the hallway of first floor building 12. And what we have there is we have a couple of trajectory rods. You see penetrated that door on the left.
So going back to the photograph before, we see more rods. For instance, in this area over here.
Yes.
Do you recall if it corresponded to projectiles leaving the building?
So there was only a total of 2 that actually penetrated the door.
And are those
You can see the 2 where they're sticking, the rods are sticking out, yes. And we did find evidence that the bullets may have most likely traveled to building 13, which is west of that area, because we did find defects on the wall where the bullet most likely struck.
And just for clarification purposes, looking at what's already in evidence as state 17. Looking at this photograph here, can you just use the annotator, use the pencil to show which side the doors we were just looking at, the projectiles came out?
So yeah, that would be the west side right here,
Oh, you're on a eraser, sorry. Now you can show.
right there.
When you took photographs of the east side, did you see any of similar projectiles leaving the building?
No.
And going back to states 29, the last picture, what is this a picture of?
So this is a picture of also the hallway of first floor, building 12. And that viewpoint is basically east looking west, pretty much down all the way down the hallway. And you can see the glare from the window on the left, and that tells me that I'm real close to the double doors on the east side.
Going back, so that is looking from east to west.
Correct.
Now, you stated earlier that you found 70 shells. Where were any of the shells found in classrooms?
No, all 70 fired casings were found in the hallway.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? We can take the cameras down.
You may.
Okay, Detective Christian. I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as 2D or DD for state's identification. Do you recognize that?
I do.
Is that in the same or substantially the same condition as it was when you recovered it?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in states 2D as states 30.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2D for identification will now be in evidence that it states Exhibit 30.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
So what are we looking at here?
These are 2 fired casings, and from quadrant 110, and 110 would be the most east side of the building, near those east doors.
So looking at the, Your Honor, if you could put on, and you can show this.
The TVs can be on.
Yes, sir. Yes. Detective, can you repeat? Oh, wait for them to come on then. Using the annotator, using the pencil, where were those approximately located?
So these were right here in quadrant 110, right in this area.
Okay. And that's 2 shell casings?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been marked previously for identification as states 2E. Do you recognize that?
I do.
Is that in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered it?
It is.
Okay. And what is it?
This is a fired casing recovered from quadrant 19, which would be in this area right here.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will request to move in states 2E for identification as states 30.
Defense, any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2E for identification will now be in evidence. That is states Exhibit 31.
Detective, you already circled where this was located, correct?
I did.
And that's the second, or the, to the left.
Correct.
Your Honor, may I approach witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm now showing you it's been previously marked as 2F or FF for identification. Do you recognize this?
I do.
And is that in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered it?
It is.
And what are they?
These are 20 fired casings recovered from quadrant 18.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will request to move in what's been previously marked as 2, or for identification as 2F and as states 32.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection,
Right there.
states 2F for identification will now be in evidence. That is states Exhibit 32.
And Detective, showing you what's now states 32. How many rounds were collected?
20, this is the same one, 18. 20 rounds.
Why are they broken up individually into different vacuum seal
So these are
packs?
the different manufacturers. So they're all pretty much the same caliber. They're all either .223 or 5.56, which is actually a similar round that can be shot out of an AR-15. Most AR-15s can shoot either round. So most of the ones that I did collect were .223s. There were a couple of 5.56 NATO rounds as well, but this one looks like it's mainly .223s.
And these were collected from quadrant
1-8.
1-8, which is the farthest to the left circle now.
Correct.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm now showing you 2G, or GG for identification. Do you recognize this?
I do.
And is it in the same or substantially the same condition as it was when you recovered it back in February 2018?
Yes.
And what is it?
These are the 12 fired casings from quadrant 1-7, and then there's one live round that was also recovered from quadrant 1-7.
And where is 1-7 located?
In this area right here.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in 2G or GG into evidence of states 33.
3. Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Without objection, states 2G for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 33.
And Detective, same question as before. Why are they vacuum sealed in different
Again, these
portions?
are the manufacturer. I just divided them up in manufacturer and make. So LC17, PMC, LC12, FC7, these are just different manufacturers. That's why I divided them up that way.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm now showing you it's been previously marked as 2H for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is that in the same or substantially the same condition as it was when you recovered it back on February 14th of 2018?
Yes, sir.
Can you speak up?
Near?
Both.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered it back in February of 2018?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will request to move in states 2H or HH into state as states 30.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Without objection, states 2H for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 34.
Detective, did you already mark on the screen which quadrant this came from?
I did. It's quadrant 1-6.
And same with the seals for
Yes.
different.
There's different manufacturers.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm now showing you it's been previously marked as states 2I or II for identification. Can you take a look at that?
Yes.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, these are the 3 fired casings I collected from quadrant 1-5.
Are they in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered them?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will request to move into I or II into evidence as states 35.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2I for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 35.
And you just circled around the area that
Correct.
says 0, 1, 2. Is that correct?
1-5 is the, 1-2 is the number on the
On the map.
but quadrant
Yeah,
1-5, correct.
Detective, I'm now, Your Honor, may I approach witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm now showing you it's been previously marked as 2J or JJ for state's identification. Do you recognize that?
I do.
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as it was when you recovered it?
It is.
What is it?
This is a fired casing collected from quadrant 1-4.
1-4. Can you show where 1-4 is?
I can. Sorry.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in states 2J or JJ into evidence of states 36.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2J for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 36.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as for state's identification purposes as 2K or KK. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is it?
This is the fired casing collected for quadrant 1-1.
And where is 1-1?
That would be right next to the west side doors.
Oh, can you just,
Yeah, absolutely, right there.
Your Honor, at this time, or is this the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered it?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will request to move in states 2K or KK and the states 37.
Defense, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Without objection, states 2K for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 37.
Detective, you just described this as 1-1, states 37, and states 36 as being in 1-4.
Correct.
So there's a gap in between where the
1, 2, and 1, 3. So basically the restrooms, the bathrooms, and the close to where the teacher's lounge.
Can you hold on a second? Can you just mark that area where nothing was found?
Right in this area right here.
Now, when you were on scene, did you also document the deceased individuals on the first floor?
I did.
And how many deceased individuals were on the first floor?
There was 7 that were present when I was there, and then but a total of 11 were shot on the first floor.
Were shot and killed?
Yes.
In addition to the photographs, the shell casings, the trajectory rods, was there anything else that you personally did on the first floor?
We collected evidence pertaining to the other case, but other than that, no.
Your Honor, if I may go, Detective Gresham.
Okay, cross-examination, go ahead.
Defense has no questions.
State, is the witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor, I would just like to publish these to the jury.
Yeah, he may step down.
He may step down
You may
to
publish
publish,
the
yes.
exhibits to the jury. Thank you very much, sir. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you just want to take a look at it, pass it to your neighbor till they go all the way around. And again, I'll repeat what I told you previously. This is not the only time that you will see these exhibits. All these exhibits will be with you in the jury room while you are deliberating the case. You're ready to call your next witness?
Yes, sir. At this time, Your Honor, the state will call Detective Gloria Crespo.
If I could have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please. Once you reach it, but before you have a seat, if you could just stop and look at me, please. Raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Please be seated. And once you are seated, if I can get you to scoot that chair all the way up as far as it will go. Can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
Sergeant Gloria Crespo, Crespo.
Gloria?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Kohberger, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sergeant, what agency do you work for?
Broward Sheriff's Office,
Now, going back into February 14th of 2018, what unit were you in?
crime scene unit.
And what was your main responsibility in the crime scene unit?
I was a crime scene detective.
What do crime scene detectives do in general?
We go to scenes and process scenes,
And by process, you mean things
collecting
like
evidence, photographing, documenting.
So those specific tasks that you were assigned, is that something that you did at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in February of 2014?
Yes,
Were you specifically assigned to a floor in the 1200 building?
I was assigned to a floor and I was also assigned to the hallways.
Okay, and was that on the third floor?
The floor that I was assigned to was the third floor, yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, while you were conducting your job on the third floor, did you see remnants of gunshots?
Yes.
How many gunshot shell casings did you find?
I collected 61 on the third floor.
Did you collect any other on any other floor?
I collected in the stairwell 2.
In the stairwell, on what floor?
It was on the first floor. It was a 1200A was a stairwell on the west side.
Okay. So while you were assigned to the third floor and predominantly did most of your work on this third floor, you also happened to be the crime scene detective at the time that collected the two shells from the west stairwell. On the
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'll have to keep the televisions off for a portion of this.
Off. Court
Yes.
Deputy Eunuch, we need the TVs off, please.
Did you take photographs on the third floor?
I did.
Let me ask you, over how many days were you processing the scene at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?
We were there for several days.
Several days. So this wasn't one thing that you just got done on the 14th.
No.
I'm showing you what's already been entered into evidence. It states 22. Do you recognize this diagram?
Yes.
Okay. You're actually able to annotate. You're actually allowed to make you can make pencil marks on it, Your Honor. You can please enable that. Which side, looking at this diagram, is the east side? And if you could just do the same for the west side. Now, did you also break up the third floor into quadrants just as Detective Christian did?
Yes.
Okay. And as Detective Christian, did you start with the 10th quadrant on the far east side and work your way west?
We started on the west side with quadrant 1 to the east to 10.
10 is on the east, 1 is on the west.
Yes.
Sorry for asking a very confusing
That's
question.
okay.
Now, were you also tasked with taking photographs?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I'm showing you what's already been previously marked as 2M for identification. Can you please take a look at these photographs? Do you recognize these photographs?
Yes, sir.
Are they a true and accurate depiction of the third floor of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas 1200 building back in February 2018?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in what's already been previously marked as states composite 2M into evidence as states 39, a composite of 14 pictures.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2M for identification will now be in evidence. That is states exhibit 38, a composite exhibit of 14 photos.
I apologize for states 30. Now, Sergeant, I'm going to show you the first picture. Do you recognize this picture?
Yes.
What are we looking at here?
Looking at, well, I'm inside the teacher's lounge.
The teacher's lounge, now referring back to what's already in evidence, is states 22. Do you recognize this diagram of the third floor?
Yes, the teacher's lounge is right here.
Can you please, thank you, mark where it is? Which direction are we facing when we look at this photograph?
You're facing west.
Now looking at the second picture. What are we looking at there?
You're looking at the parking lot.
And which way are we facing there?
West.
Do you see the football field?
Yes.
Now the third picture. What are we looking at here?
It's the area where you walk through to go towards that football field that you saw.
Is that facing southbound?
This no.
This is still facing west.
Yes.
Okay. And at the bottom of the screen, do you see projectile strikes? What would you call those?
Yes.
Projectile strikes? Okay. How many do you see here, or how many do you count for?
And there could be fragments that could have also had struck it, but I would say that's for sure 2, possibly 5.
How many shell casings did you recover from the teacher's lounge?
The teacher's lounge, I've referred to my notes, because there was one there's an extra room in that teacher's lounge.
Okay.
So,
Looking at the diagram, you
Right.
marked earlier where the teacher's lounge is. Do you mean the bathrooms, or do you mean where it says 1240A?
well, it says 1240A, there was one.
You can do it now.
It was right here.
So there was one shell in there,
Yes.
and in the teacher's lounge, the rest of the teacher's lounge, how many shells did you?
There was a total of 9.
And going back to the photographs. Is this still within the teacher's lounge?
That one, yes.
Facing southbound?
No.
Do you see the building to the left side over there?
Yes.
Okay. Showing you the next, which is, do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. How many projectile strikes do you see in that photograph?
Possibly 4. Can you move the photograph
sorry.
up?
Yes, I apologize.
Thank you. Yes, 4.
Now, in terms of the projectile strike, let me see if I can get a little bit closer. This one here, does that look different from that one there, for instance?
Yes.
What could account for that?
The distance, the force it hit the window, the fragmentation. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area.
Do you see in this photograph, do you see kind of like the football field with the soccer nets in the background?
Yes.
Facing west?
Yes.
Looking at the next photograph. Zoom out a little bit. Is that similar to the picture we just saw before?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and do you see the football field and the soccer nets behind it?
Yes.
Now looking at the next photograph. Is this from the third floor as well?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall which window we're looking at here?
It's the hallway window.
The hallway, not the teacher's lounge.
No.
Okay. And do you see how many projectile strikes are on the window panes?
On the window panes, you said?
Yeah, in the windows itself.
The window itself?
Yes.
There's 5.
Do you, when you see a strike, I'm going to try to zoom in as much as I can here. Do you mark it with like a little sticker?
Yes, those are my measurements.
Okay, those are the measurements. So is that the little card that
Yes.
you utilize? Okay. Now looking at the next picture. What are we looking at here?
Documentation of that window and that whole wall?
Is that same hallway, the west side of the third hall?
Yes.
Okay. These markings, for instance, up here, or over here, or down here, what are they indicating?
They indicate possible strike marks
Okay.
and measurements.
Could you actually see like basically holes in the wall?
There's going to be some type of a disturbance.
Okay. Now looking at the next
Omar?
photograph. Is that a similar picture, just taken at a different angle?
Yes.
Now to the right, the door that you see to the right, is that the teacher's lounge?
Yes.
Now looking at the next photograph. Do you see what classroom number that is?
Yes, 1255.
And do you see the name on the door that's kind of written down? Over here?
Miss LaBelle.
Do you see any projection strikes or any bullet holes in this particular picture?
Yes.
Can you just circle them and highlight them for the jurors? Looking at the next picture, is that the same room but with the door open?
Yes.
What's the purpose of the yellow tape kind of behind the door? Do you see it there?
It's measurement.
What's the importance of measurements in regards to crime scene investigation?
I need to recreate the scene.
Now looking at the next photo, do you recognize this?
Yes.
Is that in Miss Lapel's room, the same room, the 1256?
Yes, that's the other side of that wall.
Okay. Do you see, I know there's a glare, do you see projectile strikes in this photograph?
Yes.
Could you please circle them for me? Thank you. Now, you also took photographs of the hallways themselves, correct?
Yes.
Looking at the photograph here. Do you see any of the shell casings that you collected?
Yes.
Could you please circle some of them? Now, this item right here, what is that?
That's a magazine.
Magazine utilized in a rifle?
Yes.
And that's what contains
That's what.
the bullets? Okay. Now showing from a different angle. Do you see additional shell casings?
Yes.
Could you please circle them for the jurors? Do you see any on the far right side, bottom right side?
Yes.
Now, just for clarification purposes, looking at what's already been put into evidence as states 17. Which side of the building was that on that we were just looking at?
That was the east side of the building.
Okay, so could you just mark which side that was on?
Okay, I'm turned around with this photograph. It would be this side here.
The east side.
Yes.
Now, you testified earlier breaking it down into quadrants. Quadrant 10 being the farthest to the east. How many shells did you recover from quadrant 10?
Quadrant 10 was
Yes.
quadrant 10 was none. It was like a half a quadrant.
Okay, so you recovered
From quadrant 10, none.
none. Quadrant 9.
I'm referring to my notes to be accurate. Quadrant 9, I recovered 11.
Quadrant 8. And hold on, you know what, actually, hold on one second, I'll put this down. Can you just circle or mark for the jurors?
Somewhat where it's at.
Yes, so let's just start again with quadrant 10. And quadrant 9.
Quadrant 9 is right at the, up here.
And how many shells did you recover from there?
11.
And quadrant 8.
1255 is about here.
And how many did you recover?
That was 17.
Could you please write 17? Thank you. I know it's kind of hard.
Hard to, sorry.
Quadrant 7.
Quadrant 7 was about there.
And how many shells did you recover from there?
1.
In quadrant 6. Did you recover any from quadrant 6?
No, 0.
0. Okay, so 29 shells from the east side of the building, is that correct?
Yes.
By breaking it up by quadrants. Okay.
28, right?
11, 17, and 1. So 29. Right, 1, 17, and 11?
Yes, sorry, 20. Yes, correct. My math.
No problem. If you can continue to go down. So quadrant 5, how many did you recover?
None, 0.
Quadrant 4?
4 was about here. That's 2.
Quadrant 3?
About here. I have 6.
Quadrant 2?
4,
in quadrant 1.
ten,
Now going back, and I know you testified earlier, but in room 1240A, so at the top left-hand side, you recovered 1,
yes,
and in the teacher's lounge itself, you recovered 9.
9,
Were there any others recovered on the 3rd floor?
no,
Okay. Judge, we can take the screen off now. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Your Honor, just one moment. Yeah, you're right. It's 2M, so we're not going to go back. 2M, yes. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I'm now showing you it's been previously marked as 2N for identification. Do you recognize that?
yes,
Is it in the same or substantially same condition as you when you recovered them?
yes.
Okay. Which quadrant did you recover these from?
This is quadrant 9,
Quadrant 9. Okay. On the east side.
yes,
Your Honor, this time to say request to move in states 2N states 39.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2N for identification will now be in evidence that is State's Exhibit 39.
Got it. Hey, Detective, I have a question. This is vacuum sealed?
yes.
Why is it broken up like that? Why differentiate?
Differentiated between the brands of the ammunition. So basically, in layman's terms, like you would have sneaker brands, ammunitions have the same type of identifier, so they have identifiers, different type of ammunition.
And is that a common practice? And when you recover ammunition or shells of different brand numbers or brand names to do it like that?
That's what I do.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as states 2O or 00 for identification. Recognize this.
Yes,
What is it in the same, substantially the same condition as when you recovered it?
yes.
What is it?
Fire casings.
Okay, and this is from which quadrant?
This is going to be from quadrant, label everything, quadrant 8.
Quadrant 8, so it's still on the east side.
Yes,
Your Honor, at this time, the state will request to move in states 2O or 00 and states 40.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2O for identification will now be in evidence that is State's Exhibit 40.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Sergeant, I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as 2P for state's identification. Do you recognize this?
yes,
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered it?
yes.
What is it?
It's fire casing.
And which quadrant?
This is going to be from quadrant 7.
Quadrant 7. Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in state's evidence 2P, states 40.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, states 2P for identification will now be in evidence that is State's Exhibit 41.
Your Honor, may I approach witness?
You may.
Sergeant, I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as States Q or QQ. Do you recognize that? Or do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
2 fire casings?
And are they in the same or substantially the same condition as before?
Yes.
Now these, well, at this time the state would request to move in Q2Q as States 42.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, States 2Q for identification will now be in evidence that is States Exhibit 42.
Your Honor, may I approach witness?
You may.
Sergeant, I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as States identification 2R or RR for identification purposes. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered it?
Yes.
What is it?
Fire casings?
How many fire casings?
6.
And from which quadrant did you?
Quadrant 3?
Your Honor, at this time the state would request to move in States 2R or RR into evidence at States 43.
Any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, States 2R for identification will now be in evidence that is States Exhibit 43.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Sergeant, I'm now showing you it's been previously marked for States identification purposes as States 2S or SS. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And what is that?
Fire casings?
Are they in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered them?
Yes.
Which quadrant did you recover those from?
This is quadrant 2?
Quadrant 2. So that's on the west side of the building.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time the state would request to move in States 2S or SS and is at States 43.
44.
44, I'm sorry. Apologize. 44.
Defense, any objection?
No objection.
Without objection, States 2S for identification will now be in evidence that is States Exhibit 44.
Now, Detective, looking at what's now in States 44, why is it broken up into 3 on the bottom and 1 up here?
What do you mean?
Well, 3 shell
3?
casings.
Right, it's
now.
just different. Again, we just have different brands. And this is so this at one, it was 1 PMC fire casing, and then 2 Lake City. And then we have, one was from the floor hallway, so it was a different area.
Got it. Okay. And these were all from, I'm sorry, I know you said I have a quadrant.
It was quadrant 3, 2, so that it was all from, obviously from the hallway.
Okay.
Right.
Besides the teacher's lounge and the part of the teacher's lounge, the addition room, were all other shells recovered from the hallways?
Yes. And then the ones I recovered from downstairs that we talked about.
Yes, and downstairs, yes. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Sergeant, I'm now showing you it's been previously marked for State's identification as 2T or TT. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
Fire casings?
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as when you recovered them?
Yes.
Okay. How many casings are we looking at?
There's 10.
Now, which quadrant did you recover these from?
This is quadrant 1.
I'm sorry,
Quadrant 1.
Quadrant 1. So that's on the west side?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in States 2T.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Without objection, States 2T for identification will now be in evidence that is States Exhibit 45.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Sergeant, I'm now showing you some previously marked for identification. for identification as states 2U or UU. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Did you recover those?
Yes.
Are they the same or substantially the same condition as when you did?
Yes.
What quadrant were those recovered from?
This is the room 1240.
So this is from inside the room.
Mm-hmm.
And how many shell casings are we looking at there?
We're looking at 9.
9 from the teacher's lounge.
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state request to move in states 2U.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Without objection, 2U for identification will now be in evidence. That's State's Exhibit 46.
First witness.
You may.
Sergeant, I'm not showing you what's been previously marked as an identification as states 2V or VV. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
1 casing.
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as it was when you recovered it?
Yes.
Where was that recovered from?
This is inside that room from the teacher's lounge.
So the top, like the north room, the north part of the teacher's lounge?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in states 2B or VV into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor, no objection.
Without objection, 2V for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 47.
Why does this one have a box, whereas the other ones don't? Is there any particular reason?
No.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Sergeant, I'm now showing you for this mark for identification as states 2W or WW. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Wow, what is it?
2 casings.
Is it the same or substantially the same condition as where you recovered it?
Yes.
Where did you recover this from?
Stairwell.
On which floor?
First floor landing.
Okay. When you say the stairwell, was it on the steps or was it on the bottom?
No, it was on the bottom.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move in states 2W or WW into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
States 2W for identification will now be in evidence. That is State's Exhibit 48.
So, Sergeant, how many rounds in total were fired on the third floor?
On the 3rd floor, we had 61 fire casings.
Now, as part of your job in the crime scene, do you also, back on February 14th, 2018, when you responded as crime scene, did you see deceased individuals on the 3rd floor?
Yes.
Do you recall their names?
Yes.
Starting from the east side, quadrant 10-9 area,
Okay.
do you recall who you saw there?
Scott?
By Scott, you mean Scott Beagle?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I'm sorry for the record.
Yes.
Okay. Moving further down west, who did you see next?
Kara?
Tara Laughlin?
Yes.
Laughlin. Who else did you see?
Meadow?
Meadow Pollock?
Yes.
And further down, who did you see?
It was Joaquin?
Joaquin Oliver?
Yes.
And moving further down, who did you see?
Jamie?
Jamie Guttenberg?
Yes.
And then further down, who did you see?
Peter?
Is that Peter Wang?
Yes.
And you're tasked with taking photographs of them and documenting any evidence in regards to their deaths, correct?
Yes.
Now, we spoke about what unit you were in February 2018. What unit were you in previous to being in crime scene?
I was a road patrol deputy, and I was a school resource officer.
School resource officer. What year did you become a school resource officer?
2002,
2002. And you were a school resource officer from 2002 until what year?
2016.
For those 14 years, were you at the same school or were you at different schools?
I was assigned to one school,
Which school is that?
Cooper City Elementary.
Now, in order to become a school resource officer for the Broward Sheriff's Office, did you have to go through additional training?
I did.
And what did that training entail?
So I was a Cooper City police officer first. So when I came over to the Broward Sheriff's Office and merged, I was already a school resource officer.
Okay.
Mr. Kilburn, let me interrupt you.
Sure.
We've been going about 90 minutes, so we're just going to pause on the direct examination. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a quick 5-minute restroom break. Please do not discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, and the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else. If you leave the notepads in the chairs and step back when we real quickly, we come back, we'll resume the direct examination of the witness, okay? Thank you. Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Everyone can be seated. Real quick 5-minute restroom break. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes.
That's segment number 1. There is more to come. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.
This has been a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.